always said in Black Panther Party that they can do anything they want to us. We might not be back. I might be in jail. I might be anywhere. But when I leave, you can remember I said with the last words on my lips that I am a revolutionary.
These are the voices of New Afrika. These are the voices of New Afrika. These are the voices of New Afrika. Free in the land, and we ain't asking y'all. Mic is off. Welcome to another episode of the Voices of New Afrika, the show where we educate the uneducated and re-educate the miseducated. My name is Brother Prophecy, aka Yera Almighty. I got my comrade with me, my elder, my grandmaster teacher for Dolly. How you doing, brother?
Doing great as we can under the system that we are part of, that we have been exploited by.
Definitely, no doubt. Had a very good conversation earlier in our social media portion of the broadcast. We talked about a lot of different things, and specifically, let me check something real quick. Specifically, okay. Every week we come in and we talk about how we educate the uneducated and re-educate the miseducated. Why do we always start the show out talking about the importance of educating the miseducated and educating the uneducated and re-educating the miseducated?
It's very important that we understand that we're talking about political education, because political education is what's happened among other people. Because we are nationalists and we are Pan-Africans, and we want our people to understand that we are an African nation, that we are new African, that we have a government, we have all those things that would be necessary for us to become independent. And so when we talk about educating, because the information is not flowing from the system, it is necessary for us who are human rights advocates and who are liberation, people, to begin to understand that our people have not been given the education that would be necessary for them to understand why they should be a part of the liberation movement. But we also had the miseducated who believe that, that the system will work for us, that the only thing we have to do is just come together and advocate for, civil rights. And that's all we need to do, and ultimately we're going to win, within this system. But a long time ago, we understand that this system will never work for us, and all remedies have been exhausted. We have tried every remedy possible to become part of the so-called United States of America, and other countries in the world. Africans have become French, and Africans have become Britain. Africans have become, attempted to become part of the system of colonialism that will make them citizens inside the so-called mother country, the countries that basically conquered various areas of the world and have exploited the peoples of the world. And so it's necessary for us to talk about the miseducated as well as the uneducated. Uneducated are basically the easiest ones for us to deal with, because it's just a matter of us presenting the information, new information, so they can begin to understand that they have not, had any opportunity to be able to study us as a people, and to understand why we should study us as a people, and why we should know our history, and why we should know all the things to be necessary, and to know that, but that they do understand that we are not part of the system. The uneducated does know that we have been, basically exploited. And one of the things that we're going to do when we do with the uneducated is to understand, for them to come to political education, so that we can begin to understand ourselves as a people locally, nationally, and internationally. And Malcolm has told us that we must internationalize our struggle, and that means human rights. human rights is the only way that we're going to be able to organize ourselves to become liberated from this system of exploitation and from the oppressive nation. But we're an oppressed nation, and we've been forced to cooperate with the oppressive nation that has no intention of letting us go. So, but we have a lot of miseducated Africans that we have to re-educate, because at one point in time they may have understood that we are a nation, that we've been an oppressed nation ever since we've been here. But they have hopes of dreams of coming a part of a system that has never worked for us and has always we had it put on our neck. And so that is why we said that the uneducated as well as the miseducated, because all those elements are needed for us to become organized as a people. And so this is the task. And not very many people, Africans, that know of the existence of the liberation movement that is continuing to exist. And the Republic of New Afrika has to be part of the information that's been fed to both the uneducated and the miseducated.
Okay. So I know a lot of people out there, like I am, you know what I'm saying, because we have a lot of people who have a lot of access to information. There's a lot of information out there. You can Google just about anything, and everybody has a platform. Everybody has an opinion, and everybody's putting different forms of information on it. If anybody's like I was, I learned about religion. I learned about many of the inconsistencies within religion and how religion has been used to control our people and help us, put us in a mental state of that we could be better enslaved. I learned about our history that really help to eradicate those thoughts of white supremacy in which we have been indoctrinated into. I learned all of those things, but it wasn't until I learned actual political education that I even understood what moves that I needed to make, what moves that we needed to make collectively to actually gain true liberation. I was of the mindset is all we need to know is to learn who we are and learn some stuff about history and get rid of white Jesus and we'll be free. But it wasn't until I learned some political education that I figured out, I was taught that, okay, we need to engage in controlling our own community to ultimately go toward nationhood independence and join an organization that is actually striving to bring about those type of things. So if you can, speak to, the difference between just simply being conscious and being politically educated.
Okay, so we have to look at our our past leaders, Marcus Garvey and Malcolm X, and different leaders that came forward to say that we need to have an ideology, and that ideology many times has been called nationalism. Malcolm said black nationalism. Well, if we look at, and we got to understand why we said nationalism, why we said Pan-Africanism, because we need to have a coherent identity. If political education allows us to have our identity, to recognize what our identity is as Africans throughout the world, and political education allows us to be able to organize. Because if you look at any other people, and see what how they're operating from a nationwide basis. Even if you see people who are like, we used to be a part of the so-called Vietnam War and fighting for America. And the Vietnamese, the ones that were the traitors in Vietnam, that came, here to America. They continue to be Vietnamese. They have a Vietnamese bank, and they have, and they're getting funds and stuff from the government, to when they came here, But ultimately, they organized themselves as a nation, even though they were a reactionary nation from the progressive nation of Vietnam. And if we look at all, in almost every instance where people are organized, they also get land. they get control of certain areas of the country, and and they're able to operate their economies and all that because they're controlling their land politically. They're control, So it's through political education that you are able to begin to deal with your identity. So one thing that wouldn't happen in terms of the civil rights movement is that a lot of people abandon, their nationality. They became Afro Americans or African Americans or, Black Americans. And we don't have no basis for calling ourselves Black America or African American because we don't control any of the land in this country or whatever. We don't have any control of our communities. And we became integration became disintegration. The integration that happened was we were finally integrated into the oppressive capitalist system, where they had blocked us out through so-called segregation and separation, to the point of where we had to survive for ourselves, and we created our own institutions, and we were able to give an example in the city of Memphis. There was one time, up until the day of so-called integration, there were about 9 different hotels or motels owned by Black folks in the city of Memphis. Now you have only one that had just come into existence, and the Lorraine Motel was one of the most profitable hotels in Memphis, during the time when King came and was assassinated and all that. So, but there were like 8 other hotels and stuff that was in Memphis. And as a result of integration, what I call disintegration, we abandoned all our, our ability to go in and maintain the existence of those, because we wanted to go to the Holiday Inn and we wanted to go to all those other, and the reason why we do that is because our leadership in the civil rights movement wanted to be integrated. They believe their children, in order to be educated, they had to have their children sitting next to a white child, And these are this is the whole miseducation process that we were talking about in terms of that. And what we're saying is that in order for us to organize ourselves as a people, we got to understand that we got to have mass political education for the mass of people, and we got to have revolutionary education for the people who are going to be in a leadership position in organizations. And so at one point in time, we were moving, and that was, under the auspices of when we said Black Power, and Black folks began to cast white people out of their, out of their organizations and stuff, like Student Nonviolent Court. And they weren't just kicking the whites out because they had animus towards the whites. They were saying whites were controlling our organization, and then they were asking the whites who were supposedly committed to that struggle to go back to their own communities and organize themselves against racism. Racism was a problem. Racism was not a problem in our community, And so therefore, what we didn't need was power. And once we understand the power equation, then now the mistakes that were made was in thinking that we could get power within America. That's why we had to, race for Black mayors and councilmen and different things like that. But we didn't know our history. We didn't know that we had that during what they call a Reconstruction era, after the Civil War, and when Black men were given the right by the 15th Amendment to vote in America, and we had Black politicians, all the states had Black politicians, and Black politicians set up the governments and stuff after the Civil War under the Republican Party. And the Republican Party betrayed Black folks in 1877 and took out the forces that were protecting the Black men who were in office. And so we had various massacres and killings and assassinations that took Black men out of the position that they were in. And it was not until the 1920s that in places like Chicago, that you had the Black politicians to return to so-called American politics and all that. And then you had the 1965 Voting Act, Rights Act. But these are, this is why we say that all remedies have been exhausted because we fought for civil rights and we got civil rights, and the civil rights were taken from. Because anytime your enemy can give you something like that, they can also take it back. If they can give it to you by voting, they're going to take it away by voting, by voting it out. And so that's what we have, where we are today. So that's why our political education has to tell our people that we are not a part of this system, that we're only an exploited African nation. And this new African nation here has to have control over land. And all the other people who have migrated, to this country or whatever, have retained their so-called nationality. We're the only ones that have been asked to give up our nationality.
Excellent point. I want to go briefly to the audience real quick. What's up to Joe Gonzalez? I see you had to check out. You had to do some other things, but I do want to acknowledge you. Say greetings, revolutionary comrades. Greeting to you, Mr. Joe Gonzalez. Good to see you. Umwa Bantum number 2. Salutations, family. Salutations to you. You from Florida, aren't you? You down there from Florida, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. But a good also always hear from you. It's Veronica. How you doing? Good to hear from you. Been a minute, but it's always good to hear from you. Peace and power to you also, Queen. So we're talking about the need to be re-educated. Do our people need to be re-educated? You talked about a lot of different things. Something I wanted to kind of build on, because a lot of time we see our people getting pulled into other people's movements, other people's struggle. You see people, something that gets on my nerves all the time when people say, "Oh, well, you really want to affect change, you need to get out and vote. You get out. If you don't vote, then you don't even have a right to complain." And that irks me, because I mean, in essence, too many times our people are used as political pawns in someone else's game in order to give other movements, other people's movement power in their own ideological struggle between Democrat and Republican parties. And be clear, when we say political education, we're not talking about Democrat and Republican. We're talking about an ideology that is going to support our movement and support our liberation. That's our politics, not getting wrapped up into other people's politics. But if you could kind of speak to how we get pulled and sucked into other people's movement that don't benefit us, but it only serves to use us, while we're thinking we're actually doing something that's benefiting our community.
Yes. So if we just deal with the civil rights movement, and when you had the Civil Rights Bill of 1964, they had on that no discrimination due to race or sex, and the white women, became a part of it. In other words, became the beneficiaries of the 1964 civil rights movement. And then, and today, we're seeing lesbians and gays, and also everybody has benefited from the so-called civil rights bill, other than us, and so. Consequently, that's why, like when we look at it, and we had people that in the civil rights movement in cities like Atlanta, there were people like Andrew Young, and people that was in SCLC, and they became some very wealthy black folks, in a system of so-called where black folks had the black mayors, and it was a black city and all that, but the mass of the people have not benefited from it, and that is why, like when we see that you have in the so-called second Reconstruction, and the end of the second Reconstruction, we see that all resources have been exhausted out of these places, and we've inherited empty spaces. Actually, there was no power that was transferred to us by becoming the mayor of these cities or the city councilman and all that. And we look at the city of Memphis, for example, we see that the city council they're a part-time position, and they have no control. You know, I'm talking about the councilman, no control over the police and the behavior of the police. Memphis is what they call a strong mayor city, and a mayor, you know, and in particular, we have a white mayor now. Even when we had the black mayor didn't really exercise the power that was invested in their position to deal with the police. And the police has continued to be a problem even to the day when we talk about it. And so let me say this: our people who don't vote will not vote. They'll vote because they've been discouraged by the system. The system has not worked for us. You know, we've had politicians, and politicians have become part of the corruption that is invested in, you know, in the American capitalist system, and the political system, the economic system, the cultural, and all that. So we find that our people, even though it's unconscious, we have to politically educate our people to understand why we shouldn't participate in this system, you know, because all remedies have been exhausted. And so, therefore, unconsciously, the masses of people have made a correct decision in terms of, you know, because nothing has been given to us. Even when we talk about the youth, they have so-called jobs in the summer, but the jobs in the summer, let's say if we have, let's say 1,000 jobs, they're like 40,000 youth that need jobs. You know, in this system that's supposed to be, you know, like voted in by us as a black, you know, as a black majority population. And so once we begin to look at those kind of situations, that's why we have to understand why we are an oppressed nation, and that we must develop our own, get our own control of our land, so that we can begin to move and develop all the other institutions, banks, or whatever we need to develop. But we cannot do it until we get control of the politics, you know, of our community. And we got to understand our politics has to be governed by human rights, and because every people have a right to control their own destiny, control, to have power over their own lives. And this is where this is what, you know, what we're talking about when we talk about educating the people, the uneducated, and re-educating the miseducated. Because we got a lot of miseducated people who think that one day we're gonna be in control. I saw a speech by a black guy that elected mayor of Chicago a couple of weeks ago. Black guy, you know, and he was trying to give, you know, hope, like in Chicago, that black folks, you know, that we're gonna be able to control and we're gonna change. And he was from the west side of Chicago, you know, one of the worst, you know, areas of Chicago, and he was trying to praise Chicago, but Chicago and all the other cities are cities where you had bosses, where you had gangsters, and you know, and in America, the gangsters were successful in controlling the politics and organizing themselves, and ultimately get the economic power. Even though the laws that they put on us, they turn around and put on them, like the RICO laws and all that. But they're still in power. They're still in power in Boston and places like that, in Chicago, and you know, in spite of black folks being elected into office. So civil rights is a failed venture. You know, I'm not saying, you know, that we got some people who are, you know, like sincerely believe, you know, that the system's gonna work for us, but we know, we who are politically educated in the right way know that we have to separate ourselves and build our own nation, and then we got to be international, because if we don't be international, they're gonna isolate us and do everything they can to make us fail in the so-called failed states, you know. And I heard somebody talk about Haiti, you know, and I hate it. Haiti is a failed state because it's a part of, it tried to be a part of the European nation-state system, you know. And Thomas Jefferson back then said that there will never be a successful, independent black republic, you know. And so when we look at that, and we look at all the other things that they're doing to Cuba and what they're doing to Nicaragua and what they're doing. I'm talking about in the Western Hemisphere, and Venezuela, which has the richest oil deposit of any area of the world. And people in Venezuela, they got people in Venezuela coming up here, trying to cross the border in Mexico and all that. But those are the people. Most of those people are people who are basically wealthy. They're bringing their wealth up to America, and whatever wealth they can get. But they've destroyed the economy of Venezuela, and based on the Monroe Doctrine of 1823, where the United States said that the United States controls the Western Hemisphere. No European country can come in and take over in the Western Hemisphere, even though they had European countries in Jamaica and all those places there. But it was a warning, and the United States has been able to manipulate and control the economies of Mexico all the way down to Chile in South America. So basically, Colombia and all those countries and stuff are under the auspices of the United States, and even the organization of South American, so-called American states, is controlled by the United States. And so when we look at the condition under which not only the other people who are non-white are being manipulated by the United States, but this thing, all as Africans, we have been impoverished, even though we have access. We should have access to the richest deposit of gold and diamond and coltan and cobalt and all those things, but we don't run any of those things. And those people who do benefit from those systems are what we call black skin with white, with masks on for white. They don't have. They represent white power and not black power. And these are the kind of things that we have to begin to be able to educate our people to understand. We do have battles within that we're going to take, because they have created a class system, and there are some people, elements that feel like they're part of the system that will fight against us. But we're going to try to, because they have been failed, and many of them have been failed, and we're going to try to convince as many as we can to come over to the liberation movement.
Yeah. You said a whole lot, and I wanted to jump just in on a couple of that. First of all, everybody who's out there listening, make sure y'all drop a like. Drop a like and take a couple of seconds to drop a comment, so we'll know who's out there listening to us, and we can converse with y'all, and we can have an interaction. It'd be an interactive conversation, because the Voices of New Afrika is not just the voice of Brother Prophecy and Brother our Grandmaster Teacher, but it's all of our voices. But when we're talking about political education, the need to re-educate ourselves and educate ourselves, one of the most important things that we have to do that, and one of the most important tools that we have to use is organization within everything we do. Because I know a lot of people who see what's going on, and we get frustrated and complain and say, oh man, there's so much corruption, so you don't know who to trust, so the government lying and all of these type of things. What can I do? What can I do? And I always say, well, you as an individual can't do much, but we as a collective, we can do a whole lot. So if you could, educate us on the need for organizing and the need to be a part of an organization, a political organization that is advocating and struggling for our goals and objectives to be met.
And the key is to organize ourselves and create an organization that's working for the people. And, because we do have organizations, we have organizations that are over 100 years old, such as the NAACP. But what is about the NAACP? That it's still colored people. It has not gotten to be African, not black. It never become black, because those organizations have been created by people outside our community, and particularly the Zionists. What we call the Zionists. Back then we were saying Jews, basically, and former abolitionists, white abolitionists, formed the NAACP, and made their objective is to try to integrate, with the, as if we're going to be able to have power in this country. And NAACP is not an organization that I would recommend, anybody. What we want to do is get people to organize organizations that are going to work for the people, work for power over our own lives, our own destiny. And so, therefore, and you cannot do anything about organization. In the 60s or in the 20s, the Marcus Garvey organization, Universal Negro Improvement of African Community League, created a situation where they created all kinds of, organizations and institutions. But they first organized as Africans, that we are Africans at home and abroad. In other words, African, the slogan was for power for Africans at home and abroad. And so, and basically, it was through political education, through the Negro World newspaper, that they were able to communicate with our people. Our people were speaking French, Spanish, and English, and it was published in French, Spanish, and got to the people, and to the point where they had to ultimately create a situation by which they were able to evict, Marcus Garvey and sent him to Jamaica, but he spent about 3 years out of 5 years, in prison on trumped up charges by the FBI, so it's called the Bureau of Investigation, then became the Federal Bureau of Investigation. And we've had the same problem with the Black Panther Party organization that was set up in 1966, where the FBI, matter of fact, Huey P. Newton did a dissertation, got his doctorate, writing about how the FBI counterintelligence program affected the Black Panther Party and how it, how it ultimately destroyed the Black Panther Party, caused them to close down. But our people, in both instances, the 1920s and the 1960s, responded. This is how we know political education works, because when the Black Panther Party emphasized political education and had the Black Panther newspaper, organized the Black Panther newspaper, the Black Panther newspaper outdistanced all the newspapers, all the black Negro newspapers. Sometimes we said Negro newspapers that was advocating civil rights instead of talking about liberation and talking about power for our people. And so, consequently, when we talk about trying to bring our educate our people, political education, we're talking about political, but that's going to liberate us from the system. That's going to overthrow a system that has influence over our minds and control over our bodies and control over our resources, to the point of where then we've had good leaders like Marcus Garvey, who say you don't know your history. It's like having a tree without roots, and so we must know our history. But we got to know it politically to the point where we're getting power. That's the only way we're going to get power. And then we had Malcolm X, that we must internationalize our struggle. That we got to go beyond civil rights and go to human rights. And when you go to human rights, you internationalize your struggle, and you are able to get allies from throughout the world, because all the other people of the world who are oppressed nations also organize themselves. The forces within them are doing political education so that we can overthrow all of those states. It's 54 states in Africa, and none of those states are working for the people. So we got to begin, and that's what we said, united front. One way that we're talking about organizing is that we got to have a united front. We got to have people come together from all the progressive organizations. Must come together on the one objective, that is to liberate our nation and begin to create. And that's why the Republic of New Afrika was set up in 1968 to deal with the question of land. And anybody that wants to talk about reparation, all the people that talk about reparation, even Nation of Islam under Elijah Muhammad, they were talking about land, in control of land. And Republic of New Africa is calling for 5 states, that we were majority population, we had control, at a certain point in time in the so-called first Reconstruction period, to the point where our population was a majority, and we're talking about people coming back to the 5 states, to Mississippi, to Alabama, to Georgia, to Louisiana and South Carolina, to take over, our territory. That would be, the base of our territory here in the United States, because we had control of those states, throughout the majority, when black men were allowed to vote back in the 1860s 1865 to 1877. And these are the kind of things where we have to begin to understand why. So our political education is going to allow us to move forward. But you got to have organization working for the people. Yeah, we got many organizations, but they're not working for the people. We got organizations that are working on a class base. They want to just be a part of them. I don't care what it is about America. They want to be a part. They want to be rich. They want to just enrich themselves. And so we got a tiny minority of people who are against us, being independent, and against us, and they want to build up America. And we got to see. That's why we didn't celebrate Memorial Day and all those things, because African people in the United States have never benefited from fighting for the European cause.
Oh, interesting. In a couple of weeks, we're going to be celebrating something known as Juneteenth, and a lot of people. I bring that up because, like you was like saying that how we didn't celebrate Memorial Day, and
right.
and you said something really profound, because you spoke to the fact that most black people don't vote, and that it seems like a lot is made of that. When you look at mainstream media, a lot of entities in our community always urging us, saying, well, we gotta vote, but the fact that so many black people don't vote is that on a subconscious level or an unconscious level, we recognize that the system does not work for us, that our remedies have been exhausted. And I think a lot of times, on a lot of subconscious levels, we do things that we don't necessarily have the education to really understand or articulate. When I look in the community, and a lot of people complain about some of the names that we name our children, they call them ghetto names or whatnot. And I always looked at that as a person who recognized that these names, Johnson, Lewis, LaShores, these are names that are from our oppressor, and without the knowledge of Africa, without the knowledge of our history, or not without the knowledge of our culture, on some kind of subconscious level, we're trying to get rid of that, get rid of these European names. We just don't have the knowledge to really articulate it or do it in a meaningful way that's going to connect us back to our motherland and the ancestors and all of those type of things. But when you said that the lack of voting participation in our community is just our people understanding that that this system does not work for us. And I had a point, man. I'm getting old. I forgot the point that I was going for. But we understand that this system does not work for us, and that this system, that our remedies have been exhausted. Man, I forgot what I was gonna say. I'm sorry, man. You the elder, but it seemed like
about maybe about in other words, our people
do have sense.
and in other words, it might not be might not be articulating, be able to articulate, and that why we're not voting or whatever, but unconsciously, and it's just like when Malcolm X said, unconsciously we know we are African. So in the process of us trying to do political education, we're getting our people to be conscious that we are African, and we're an African nation, oppressed African nation. But deep down, we know that they are not benefiting from this system. And like we talked to a bunch of young people, that said we ain't gonna vote because they recognize that. But now the question is though, how do we capitalize on the people? Now we got to get people to organize in our community. We want to control our community. We want to control, And if we have these structures where these people are pretending to be, have power, we got to force them to make a decision whether or not they're going to do something for our community and not be a part and not continue to play that role in the system. Because we got these people who get up and say, vote for me and I'll set you free. No, we have, and that game's been run, and Jesse Jackson and all those people who pulled us back into the Democratic Party, and then they turned around and basically wouldn't allow them to get in any kind of positions and all that, to the point. But they pulled our people back into the Democratic Party. But now we have people that don't want to be a part, where they're not identified with either. Because the Republican Party, instinctively, we know that the Republican Party and the Democratic Party are both equal enemies in terms of how they're, because neither one has given us any kind of power or anything that we need. So we have to begin to have our independent politics. That's what the political education would do. Would introduce us to being independent and make our own decisions about what we're going to do in our community. And then what are we going to do about those politicians? Those African politicians who are pretending to do something for us in these so-called structures. And one idea that has been put out is that we're going to have dual power. That is, we're going to take control of our community in spite of of the person that's in that position or whatever they say they're going to be. We're going to force the issue and force the system to admit to us that they're not for us. So more of our people will be able to come talk about power in the community. We're setting up the structures in the community. That's why the Republic of New Afrika has a Black Legion. That's why Marcus Garvey had an African, legion back in the because we need to have our own militia forces, to control and run things in our community, and we had to put our militia in to keep people from coming in and taking advantage, coming from other places, and taking over the economic institutions and the medical institutions and all those things. So once we put ourselves together to self-government, and understand this is where organization comes in. The United Front is going to come up under that one organization, as they did under Garvey, and you had millions of people that joined, and then we had people, and the poor were giving pennies and stuff to keep our Garvey organization going. And if we look at the Black Panther Party and other organizations in the 60s, we set up programs in our community by forcing, in many instances, the churches to have a free breakfast program and different things like that. And the whole question of sickle cell anemia in terms of health care, all that came up under the Black Panthers office during that time. And so what we have to do is we have to break out of isolation and begin to understand that we should have our own foreign policy and our own relationship with all the other countries in the world, and we're going to have a plebiscite that's going to legitimize our movement by going to the UN and getting the UN to recognize us as a nation.
Yeah. Spoke of breaking out of
isolation. One, because we have to, as you said earlier, internationalize our movement, internationalize our struggle, and we also have to create that united front. We have to do that on a national level, international level, even including the local level.
Right.
Because one thing that I have noticed when you're going out into the community and meeting different people who are on the same page as you are, we find a lot of individuals who are doing good things, are doing positive things, who have a food growing program over here. We have somebody with a small independent school over here, and they're all doing the thing, have the right mindset, or at least similar mindsets about doing for self and taking control of our community. But they're all isolated. They're all doing their own individual thing, which makes them not as effective as they could be. You know, not saying that they're not effective, they are, but they could be we could be collectively a lot more effective in what we're doing if we are doing this thing together. And I'm not necessarily saying one group take over another group or anything like that, but if it's as simple as we are all supporting each other and building each other up, so we create an ecosystem that we feed off of each other and we all grow together. That's something that we promote and we push, and I personally push for, you know, that every time I meet somebody, I'm like, okay, we need to come together into a united front and collectively work together. That's how NABA got started. It was different programs. They said, you know what, we're all in the same area. We're all trying to do the same thing. Let's do it together. And that's kind of how we are today about that. But I want to go to a couple of comments. Brother Umwa Buntum number 2, he says, Umwa Buntum Royal Negro World Order. Okay, that's my name. The ultimate structure of the UNIAACL is a town hall, but we can move it to the household structure and take over AME churches as local town halls. Okay. All right. And you continue that. You say, I'm putting it out there. I just produced a shirt in Jacksonville, trying my best. Uganda, Nigeria, Madagascar, and South India. Okay. And also you've been busy, brother. So I think the whole America can be organized around old DMV in Spanish Florida, including Louisiana Purchase, Kush District. It depends on if Africa supports. I see it happening. All right, okay. You have any comments on response to what this brother was
Yeah, I
talking?
want to say that, we've had some examples, even in the 1970s where you had the Council of Independent Black Institutions, CB, was organized, throughout the country, and basically it was an educational institution like, preschools and everything, and they all came together in the 1970s. In other words, there are instances by which we can take examples, and because there's no way that no one organization by itself is going to be able to create all the different programs and things. So, but the overall umbrella, we have to have an umbrella. The umbrella would have to be the self-governing organization, which, and all the Pan-African, groups and things that are organized come together up under one united front. And that united front will allow for resources to be shared, and that's the whole thing. Resource sharing by different organizations who are about the same thing, who are about organizing for liberation of our people. And so I think we see it, some semblance of that, like what you said NABA. That NABA is a good example. And in other areas, people are trying to organize, united fronts in the context of organizing or moving around. So if we come up with one single organizational structure by which there are many organizations that are involved in the process of liberation, then we'll be quickly be able to see in local areas, where they will find support, from the national and international united fronts. That's what happened in the African Liberation Day uh, programs in the 1970s and 1980s, in which Zimbabwe and Mozambique and Angola and Guinea-Bissau, they were liberated to the united front of all, Africans coming together and supporting the various liberation organizations that existed in those areas. And but unfortunately, Africa is divided up in 54 different, areas, European states, mini state, micro state. We did not eliminate the power of the oppressor nation, and those most of those former colonies went back to having a relationship with, like for example, Mozambique with Portugal, and Guinea-Bissau with with whatever with Portugal also, and then you have French and all that. So when we look at how do we organize ourselves, that's why we call for Pan-Africanism. And the definition of Pan-Africanism that we have been using is the total liberation of Africa with an all-African socialist state. And then in the Western Hemisphere, we need to have a united front of all African states in the Western Hemisphere. And we'll be a part of that with the Republic of New Africa. And we'll be able to influence activities in Brazil, where you got the largest number of African people. But we got to awaken our people to our African consciousness, our African identity. And that's why we said New Africa. Malcolm was coming back from the Organization of African Unity meeting. He was coming here to organize, he said, 100 million Africans in the Western Hemisphere. And he created the Organization of African American Unity, but he was killed before that came to fruition, because we would come to the point of understanding that we are New Africans, and the New Africans exist not only here on North American continent, but in all the other African populated areas in the Western Hemisphere. And then we'll be in alliance like Haiti was in alliance with the Mexicans and the Bolivian, people that came from Bolivia, became Argentina and all those places, San Martin and all that, and Haiti before the United States, ultimately invaded, was a power in the Western Hemisphere. But Thomas Jefferson said they wasn't going to allow, and they didn't when the United States came in 1915 and took over the treasury of Haiti and gave that money to France. Called it that reparation for France.
Yeah, definitely.
We're gonna get ready to wrap it up in just a little while. Want to thank everybody for joining in the broadcast and sharing your comments with us. Before we get out of here, we've been talking about the need to re-educate ourselves, and the need to have actual political education opposed to the education that has been given to us by the colonizer. A lot of times, we can even believe that we are properly educated, but if your education is not leading you to the actions that's going to benefit your community and shaking off those individuals who have power over you and use that power to exploit you and not to elevate you, well, they don't need to have power over us, period. Then you've been miseducated, and you have to get the type of education that's going to ultimately lead to the liberation of your people, or at least lead to actions that are putting us on the path of liberation and not on the path of further exploitation and joining into a system that has benefited from our exploitation for so many centuries. You know, with that, you have anything you want to say to close it out?
Yes, I want to say that
like some of us who basically, went to so-called historically, black colleges and things like that, and there was a struggle back in the, to bring African education into the so-called schools, and black educational system was set up on some college campuses. But the main thing is that and we had to transform these places. If we have control, we get control to transform, to get away from all European educational programs, that are misleading us and taking us from our. Because when I went to the historical black college, I went to, there was no such thing as black history. There was no such thing as culture, African culture. We were doing American culture, American this and that and other. And so we fought to create, the subject matter that would, allow us to be able to get through proper research for our people in terms of. But we got to understand that unless we control these places, take over these spaces, they have no way of developing the minds of our minds. That people are coming out of Spelman and Morehouse are more European oriented, Africans who have no idea or have any desire to do anything for our people. So we have to recapture, the spirit of our ancestors, so that we'll be able to take control of our educational process, and we'll be able to reach the masses of the people. We'll be able to reach the uneducated, and we'll be able to re-educate, the people who are not, who have failed education in terms of that, and these are the kind of things I think is important. And I think we have, important discussion today that will get us to understand that without organization for our people, for the liberation of our people, we have no chance of being able to free ourselves.
Definitely. Well said. Like you said,
thank everybody for tuning in. Make sure y'all join us next week. Make sure you join us tomorrow on the New African Perspectives. Tuesday, the Foundation of the Nation. Thursdays, Conversation Between Comrades. Friday, the Truth and Power Corner with Melly Queen. And man, you join us. Continue to join the conversation. Join them study groups. If you don't have a study group, y'all create someone. If you have that political education, then don't just keep that political education inside yourself. Because what I don't know necessarily say frustrate me, but it kind of bothers me internally when I meet somebody who got a whole lot of knowledge, a lot of information, a lot of the information is needed, and they're just keeping it to themselves and just kind of all in their shell. So we need to take those things that we know, and we need to pass it on, like we used to say all the time. Each one teach one, or each one teach 10. However many we can teach, so we can get our minds right, so we can have our struggle right, our movement right, our organizations right, and we can continue this fight for the liberation of our people. And I'm gonna end this with our battle cries we always end, and that is free the land, free the land, free the land. All right, y'all. See y'all again next week. Really see y'all again tomorrow.
Since we know the problem, since we understand the problem, then let's not focus on the problem. Let's focus on the solution. Because see, right now, we have the power, we have the ability to create institutions within our own community that we control and that benefits us. We can do that. We can create our own school. We ain't got to keep on complaining about, man, the schools are failing us. Well, we need to create schools in which we can control. We can do that. You know what I'm saying? Just instead of buying the Michael Jordans, let's put away something for our own schools. Instead of talking about how bad the food is and how it's killing us, and it is killing us.
Yes, sir.
We can get some of this land and we can grow our own food. We can create our own grocery stores. We can do for self. You know what I'm saying? At some point in time, we got to grow up. And you stop saying, I'm a minority. Minority means you're a minor. That means you're a baby. You're not an adult. But globally, we ain't minorities. We outnumber other people who have been dominating us over 10 to 1. So we need to act like it. Be grown men and women and take responsibility for our community. Because we can do that. Because you come from the great